Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture. This is season 2, and I have with me Raudric Curtis from Royal House Comics. And obviously, before we dive too much into it, I do want to remind everybody links are up above for me as well as my guest. He has a lot of stuff going on, a lot of cool projects going on, so check them out. So, welcome to the show, man.
Oh man, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you, man. Love your show. Just excited to get on and chop it up with you.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited, and I'm one to absolutely enjoy compliments because that's the best way how to win me over. So clearly, we're off to a great start right now. So obviously, there's a lot of stuff that you're doing, and I want to get into a bunch of it. And I think the best place to start is what is Royal House Comics, because you are a comic writer and you are also a comic publisher, and you're a small indie comic publisher, and you're going in that direction, and you're really brand new.
Yeah, we've only been operating for going on 4 months. Royal House started off as an idea, as a way to solve problems in indie comics. So I had my own personal project, Pharaoh versus Priest, which will be released, the first release under Royal House Comics. That'll be done this end of this summer, early fall. It's going to be featured in LA Comic Con, and that was my first project. It's maybe about 6 panels from being complete, but I have more ideas. And you know, I was thinking about, where am I going to publish this, right? I need to have my own. I want to be self-published. I want to have my own publishing company. So I figured, I'm going to start this company, and then I did, and I have this huge platform, and just me, right? So it's bigger. It's bigger than me now. So I'm in these indie comic groups, and a lot of people are having the same issue as me. Like, I'm building this comic, and I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to publish. And I just threw it out there, Andrew, as just like hey, who wants to start a publishing house? That's how Royal House Comics started. I went on there and posted, who wants to start a publishing house? And you can imagine the range of responses that I got from, oh, is it a paid gig? Or, I wouldn't do that. What have you published? And I didn't respond to anything but people that said, hey, what's the next step? Hey, what's the next step?
So
And that's the
let's
only
talk a
thing
little
that
bit
people
about
respond to.
this. So
Say,
I'm definitely curious about this, because obviously there's a lot of stuff going on in indie right now where we have Kickstarter, and Kickstarter is a business model that, if it's done right, it works, but also and we're about to get into a sticky situation where if you have to keep going to Kickstarter and you're doing something long term, it's a good business model. You can make money with it, but it's also not an accurate measure of a business. It really isn't, because the customer acquisition cost on Kickstarter is very different than your customer acquisition cost in acquiring a regular customer. It's, there's a great Shark Tank episode. They're talking about this very issue that was on maybe 6 months ago. And so obviously that it's fine to kickstart something. I'm not saying don't do it, but also it's kind of like, hey, real indie comics didn't have Kickstarter back in the day. And also, you need a secondary and third-tier plan once you're done with your Kickstarter, especially if you want to grow your brand name.
Well, I think that's one of the things that my team appreciated about me, is I didn't come up in indie comics. I wanted to solve a problem, which, how you develop a sustainable indie comic model was the issue, right? So I'm in any other industry. You make a product and you go out into the market and you sell it, and you have a plan to grow that market organically and long term. So I agree with you. Run a Kickstarter, somebody's going to pay a $25 tier, give you more than that because they love you and they appreciate you as a person, right? But when that second book comes out, or that third book comes out, are you going to that same group of people to do? How many times you get this exhaustion of that crowdsourcing? So we're developing our website as a marketplace, right? Like you're going to walk into a comic shop, and we have 11 people, we have 5 lines that are coming out. So it won't just be one book. It'll be like you're walking into a virtual comic store, and either you like Pharaoh versus Priest, or you like Dombey, or you like, Detective Rumble, and you pay 99 cents or $1, whatever that digital copy is, right? And what we did is took the Shonen model. Shonen doesn't make physical books anymore. The cost, the rate of cost to profit margin just didn't make sense for them to print books and sell books anymore. So all shonen content. I'm a huge Naruto fan. I watch Naruto and read Naruto on my phone, which a lot of kids and people in general do now. So the having that physical book is a great marketing tool. It's great to be and have your be displayed at a Comic Con and a comic shop, but how many comics do you have to sell out of a shop to make money and sustain this as a business model? I'm thinking if we can get, sorry for my background noise, but the model is diversify. So if you can get 10,000 people to pay 99 cents for a book, on a monthly basis, because you're driving traffic to that website, you have enough following to follow a YouTube channel and monetize a YouTube channel. You understand that your characters are cool. People would buy a t-shirt. So 100 t-shirts, you funded your book without a Kickstarter, right? And now you're getting into profit margins. So I think my team really appreciated my plan for Royal House and how it was beyond just an initial, crowdsourcing seed money, and we're an equity model, so we're partners. They're not my artists. We're business partners, and any series that's coming out of our house, everybody's going to share a percentage of it on the eventual return.
And to even talk about that, because obviously I didn't go. I'm a political science history major in college, but obviously I have the hard knock school of business where I buy and sell comics, and I'm a comic book investor. I'm a comic book trader by nature. I deal with a lot of collectibles. So I'm very familiar with business stuff and making money, and how you either make money or you don't. There's nothing in between. And I've made money in a lot of different areas in my life. And I feel that's something that's also lacking in indie comics, is that, and I was speaking to somebody, someone said, hey, and they said it live on my podcast, I'm not going to say who, but they said, I'm not a businessman. And I'm like, but yeah, you have to be in the indie comic world right now. No question about it. And I think it's a big lacking thing. You said something that you're writing a comic book. That's the product, but what you're forming is business. And I think that, a lot of indie comic creators don't view themselves as a business. They act like a business, but, I'm in the process of right now booking a cover. It's a business decision. It's an awesome cover for my store and for my eBay store, but everything is driven by business, where I've gone to 4 artists to say, hey, what's your page rate? What is your cover rate? How much is it going to cost to color it? How fast can you do it for me? And so what is that like? Because when you approach it from a business standpoint, it's a very different relationship than when you approach it from saying, hey, let's just create something, which is what Kickstarter was supposed to be like.
Well, I think, one we're, we may run a Kickstarter as what it says, a Kickstarter, right? To get a little money to do something like a huge marketing campaign, or to develop these profit centers, or digital platform or things like that, which are already in production. So like I said, that was never a huge part of our business model. It was always, what's the cost for making this website? How many shirts or phone cases do we have to sell in order to make that money back before we start even selling the comic book, right? It's straight up, expenditure and return. And I think a lot of indie comics don't understand how the idea of the IP. They think the book, the product, is the end result, and that's the only way you can make money. Whereas, how many people do you see wearing Naruto t-shirts, or the headband, or the cosplay? You know what I mean? There's just so many ways that Spider-Man, Superman, they found a way to market more than just the image in a comic book. the comic book is probably, and I told my team this, and I think they really appreciated my honesty. The comic book is the most expensive product that you're making with probably the least return. And I mean, indie comic spaces all the time, like, you don't get it for the money. I'm like, well, you have a shelf life. If you're getting into business and you don't plan on making money, eventually you're going to burn out. And if you're doing this as a nonprofit, or I don't know what the business plan is, but for me, we plan on making money at Royal House. So, my artists, I think, really appreciated the plan. And what we do is we have an in-house rate, right? So they have their outside commissions, but for anything that they're doing in-house, uh, they're partners, so they're gonna have a 20. It's like a publishing house model, right? We're gonna take submissions for other people that are figuring out how to publish, right? And we're gonna get a 25% publishing return, just like a comic book store, right? They sell your material, and they're gonna get a piece of the action because you're getting access to their market. We've built up a market, and a lot of new indie creators are gonna figure out, like, I don't have a market. I don't have, the ability. I don't know how to build a website, which we will have built. And hey, that return, that exchange makes sense for them, right? To get access to our market and to our resources. So, yeah, man, it's really, like I said, we started as a way to solve problems where there was a lot of people that didn't know how they're going to publish, couldn't find artists, writers who can't find artists who can't find writers, whether they think they need them or not. I think most artists can benefit from having a writer on project, or at least an editor on project. And a lot of artists, try to go it alone, and you can see that aspect lacking in their work.
Even copywriting, it's a whole big game where you could have somebody who already has a team put in place and they just need some help marketing, and they just say, hey, look, we just don't want to do distribution. One of the things that I have a comic idea and I just don't want to do a Kickstarter, and the reason why is that I don't want to do fulfillment. Fulfillment is very difficult. I ship out a lot of comics every single week, and it is time consuming. And I'm shipping out high-end books. And, I'm shipping out a $60, $100 book, and I'm shipping out 2, 3, 4 of them a week. And, it's very time consuming. Taping up Geminis, after like doing it like 20 of them a month, I get sick of it. I don't know about you, but I get sick of it real quick. And I think anybody who's ever run a Kickstarter or shipped out anything, it gets old. I go through so much tape every year. It's terrifying how much tape I go through. I feel like a freaking shark in you.
Well, I cut my teeth. Like I said, I'm new to the world of comics. I learned my business, acumen in a sports performance facility, where the business owner didn't even play sports. But like I said, you have that business mind, and he has this empty building with a bunch of equipment in there. And I'm the salesman, the one that's kind of learning the trade craft of being a good business person. And he's laying it out for me. I'm learning sales. I'm learning marketing. I'm learning how to go into a community. For us in the indie space, it's these Facebook communities. It's these Comic Cons, right? It's these getting a YouTube following of people that are interested in anime, right? This cross referencing. Pharaoh versus Priest started off as a novel. So a lot of people are readers that would also go read the comic if it's a book, or watch the Netflix if it's a book that they like, right? So getting out of this single genre-minded approach to business is something that I'm trying to bring to Royal House and to indie comics, right? So we plan on having short anime fight scenes for these books. We plan on having a YouTube channel that's promoting these not as just comics, but as webtoons, active with voiceover and sound, right? So you can watch and see pretty much what this would look like as an anime, right? And all to build traffic to that marketplace. So if it takes in between $2,000 to $6,000 to make a comic, that's 6,000 people that buy the book for 99 cents on a digital platform. Right. So just figuring out where those expenditures are. I think driving 6,000 people to a marketplace, that's not a huge lofty goal, right? People have, 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 people that can follow, a good idea, a good comic idea. And I think getting them to a digital space in this new digital world is probably, I don't want to say easier, but as doable as getting them into a comic shop to buy your book for $5, right? Or getting them to support two, three, four, five Kickstarters from the same company. You know what I mean? At 5, 10, $25 goals. So I think it's doable. I got a lot of flack, Andrew. I got to be honest. Like, a lot of indie creators are like, "Oh, that's not how it's done, right? You gotta do it a certain way." And I've just challenged that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in the indie community, and I think that, unfortunately, I get flack for a lot of stuff, and obviously, I get in a lot of hot water on the other side because I'm on the comic book investing side of things, and I have a very different view than the consensus, and I'm also a contrary investor by nature, and I've done very well because when everybody runs into a fire, I run away, and when everybody's running away from the fire, I run into it. And statistically, I do very well when I run into fires. And so obviously, I like what you're doing to some degree, and I also would like to see where it goes because I like letting other people test the market before me. This way, if you die, I don't. So on that note, obviously, I think it's a great segue into talking about pharaohs versus priests. And I'm sure we're going to circle back to this entire conversation at some point, but obviously this is a super interesting, I think it's your flagship comic is a good way to put it. And I'm sure you're going to correct me, but I think the basic premise is that we basically have King Tut's father and his mother are dealing with a gigantic political catastrophe where death cults are killing people and mystical things might be killing people.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, King Tut's dad is the pharaoh. He suddenly is sick or dies or he's unable to keep the throne or he's dead. And then, this new pharaoh takes the throne and now he has to deal with the problem of corruption and shenanigans in his kingdom, for lack of a better word. And you could stop me at any point. And
no, I think you're spot on, right? We're talking, it's a tragedy. Right, the story of King Tut and Akhenaten I changed the name from Nefertiti to Nefertune. These real popular figures, right, that people think they know about, right? Nefertiti, Akhenaten, King Tut. It immediately draws you in. Like, I'm familiar somehow with them, but
there's a
history
great
is so
saying.
convoluted.
But what I was about to say is that I read a lot of light novels with things that I know. Like, I'm reading the Kyoshi books right now, and I'm reading the Ace story from One Piece. And I'm also reading some Ruby stuff and Naruto light novels. And it's so easy to get into a story that you know the characters of, and you're familiar with some element of it because it's an easier path in. Because once you mention, oh, it's King Tut's dad, I now get a sense of what we're dealing with. I don't know the whole story of what we're dealing with, but I think it's very smart to give some point of familiarity because it's sometimes hard to drop a brand new concept on somebody. Now, sometimes it's great if you drop a brand new concept. This is great. This is exactly what I needed. And you're a comic reader. I'm a comic reader. And there's a bunch of books. Like The Walking Dead is a good example of that. We needed that when it first came out. But you can't do that every single week.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And there's an iconic pull to the name King Tut, right? He's in the first book, he's not even born yet, right? But I'm telling the story of his father, who, if you do some research on him and Nefertiti, they a short-lived dynasty, short-lived reign that we continue to talk about thousands of years later, right? So they left a mark, and if you do some research, and this is a funny thing about research, you delve into these different branches of completely conflicting history, right? Some people thought Akhenaten was this prominent figure that some say was the first monotheistic pharaoh. Others say he was a heretic, right? So you have these two competing thoughts of schools of thought about who he was, and I just dive right in there and just play on those two sides, and he's an alchemist who was a reluctant pharaoh. His father, his brother dies, which projects him to the throne, and him and Nefertiti have to go save Egypt from this darkness that's kind of befalling the Nile Valley. And it's like this Homer's Odyssey meets Stargate from there, right? They have powers, and there's these different villains trying to keep them from reaching the throne, and it's the fall of the 18th dynasty, which there's no happy ending to this story, but the strength of the love and the strength of the characters just has you rooting for them from the beginning to the end.
And so let's talk a little bit about this because obviously we're talking about a point of familiarity. Obviously, you've done a lot of research, and now I know a little bit about Egypt, but I know a lot more about modern Egypt. I know a lot more about like the Mamluks and the Janissaries, and that's kind of my thing. But everybody knows King Tut. Everybody has an idea of what that's like, and so obviously, what was the inspiration for this? Because obviously, I think you touched upon part of it, but like, what gave you the idea saying, hey, I'm doing this comic and this is the one I want to start with because it is such an interesting story?
That's a good question. It takes me all the way back to 2005 when I was a senior in college. All right, so I'm a new comic creator. I just wrote the novel, which will be published this summer. The comic will be released in the fall. But I got into African history as a college student, right? And we the famous bust of Nefertiti and learning about Egypt, the history of Egypt, the history of North Africa, and the development from of that society from the first dynasty, which was high technology in the early dynasty, and then a slow dwindling of technology in the later dynasty, where you would think it would be opposite, right? So you have these big block stones and these big pyramids that were built in the early dynasties, and then they lost that ability to create on that level of that scale as the dynasties evolved and into the fall of the Egyptian Empire, right? Of which Akhenaten and his, the 18th dynasty fell, and then Ramses and one of the last dynasties before Ptolemy came in, and Alexander conquered upper or lower Egypt, kind of took on a whole identity of itself in that era, right? So I'm playing on these competing cultures, these competing histories, of which Aten is the conduit, and Nefertun is the consistent, right? She's from Nubia, right? Southern Africa, and she's his wife, and he's from Upper Egypt, and their dynamic, their love, is what keeps Egypt strong. And as they fall, as their love falls, so too does the openness of who's going to come in and be the power broker in Egypt now.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with that, and it's getting very, very, very interesting with that. And so obviously, yeah, that's sort of going on. And then also, even to go further into this, there's some politics going on too, because clearly he is tasked to solve this issue of these death cults and these killing squads, for lack of a better word, and whatever evil mystical thing is trying to disrupt the land. And while everybody's turned to the pharaoh, saying, hey, how do we deal with this problem? Much like a king, obviously would be turned to in feudal, Europe, saying, hey, there's these bandits, how are we going to solve it? And well, obviously there may or may not be some people he can trust or not trust, and allies might become enemies, and enemies might become allies, and it becomes this whole complicated thing, because let's be realistic, when you have a young pharaoh who's a little bit crazy, who has a son who's relatively young, chances are that's a good time to kill somebody.
Yeah, and what I wanted to kind of the what I wanted to kind of play in and speak of is how the vulnerability of all of us, even the pharaoh, right? Even the king or the president, right? We like to hold our heroes up in this vein, like the commonality of the Superman character, or the hero who never dies, or who never has that adversity that they just can't overcome. And we become really familiar with those stories. And I think those stories will always have a draw. But you're seeing now, you know, Bad Boy, what's that new show? I think it was either Bad Boys or a lot of these shows, where they're playing the side of the vigilante, or trying to show you different ways to tell, a story of the protagonist that's not always clear, black and white. There's these gray areas, a flawed character who has maybe sometimes more than they can handle on their shoulders, which I think is a lot of us sometimes, right? We want to be the hero in our own story. And ultimately, it's a love story, because without Nefertune, there's so many times where he just wouldn't make it without her strength, and she doesn't even have powers. But I wanted to show that a strength of character and a strength of conviction can be as powerful as the ability to wave a wand or control light, or battle, some of these rich and powerful enemies that they have.
Yeah, and it's gonna get dark.
Yes. Yes, I don't think there was a way to make the death, the eventual death of King Tut, uh, bright. But I think playing into their love story, right, and no matter what's happening, the world is literally crumbling around. It's the fall of the Bronze Age and the rise of the Iron Age, right? There's whoever started it at the Bronze Age before these new power players, right? The Assyrians, the Sea People. There's no surviving the end of the Bronze Age, right? It's a new age coming, and sometimes that's us, right? That's the 20th century turn to the 21st century, and we're just talking about that with the economy of indie comics, right? There's a new age now of digital. So you know, how do you resist a changing wave, right? Successfully, and where does your heart lie as everything is kind of challenging you?
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, there's going to be a lot of testing, and I'm sure that it's things are going to happen, and we're going to see exactly where this goes, and it's going to be super interesting. I don't want to push too hard on this, but obviously, we are exploring a lot of humanity through these characters, and then obviously, I want to talk about the other comic that's sort of well known, and I'm not familiar with the other like three, so this is on the worst, but hopefully, I'm going to get this right, and it's Danby.
Dambe, oh my goodness, Dambe is that was our first Royal House collective project. So I started Pharaoh versus Priest, which is kind of like my magnum opus, right? I wrote the novel. I'm creating the comic. So when we got our our Royal House team together, we figured, okay, we need a joint venture, right? That was another thing when you're trying to get people to come on to it. I didn't bring a team on and say, hey, why don't you guys help me make Pharaoh versus Priest, right? There's no collective buy-in when you're building a team and a group for say, hey, come on and make my passion project. So, as we got the team together, we searched like what's going to be our flagship, our Royal House flagship project. So I have a lot of members from around the world, right? We have in America, we span West Coast, the South and East Coast, and then our artists, many of them are from Nigeria. We have a young female artist from Belgium, who's by way of Angola, Lesotho, um, um, Zambia. One of our writers from Zambia. So we have a nice international group. And Dambe is actually a West African martial art where they wrap up one arm. There's rules to it, right? So you wrap up one arm in this really thick cord. It's not yarn. It's like this really thick, hard cord, and you wrap it up where you just have this ball fist, and you can only block with one hand. That's called your shield hand, and you can punch with one hand, and it's called your spear hand. and it goes back hundreds of years. It has a following like UFC here in Africa, right? So we I've listened to this BBC interview where they were talking about the sport of dambe, and the young lady who was interviewing and talking about the history of it said they used to have magic involved, so they banned magic or voodoo or like people used to lace their arm or I don't know what that meant, but that just got my imagination running. Like, we're gonna tell the story of Dambe before they banned magic. So it's like hard magic system. These guys can do all kind of crazy stuff. They do wrap up their arms, so you see that element, but like there's all these animal motifs. And in the interview there was this gang called the Hyena Gang, and they would literally be walking around hyenas like they were dogs, like pit bulls, and they just come into town, they spread out, and these were Dambe fighters. So I have this leader of the hyena gang who can turn into a were hyena, right? I have this other character who can turn into a were lion. I have a character who can teleport with lightning or thunder punch. Like, it's just this crazy tournament style. It's like Teen Wolf meets tuning exams, right? It's just this crazy tournament, and it's these power scalings. You don't know who's gonna win, and it's just crazy. So all my artists just jumped in on it. Writers kind of contributed to it, and it was a true joint venture.
And yeah, let's talk about this because obviously I don't know anything about Dambe as a sport. I never heard about it before this, so I'm first to say this is new to me, and I have a feeling it's new to a lot of people. But also, people are also looking at a lot of cool sports stuff right now. And if the anime world teaches us anything, I've watched animes about badminton. I watched animes about volleyball, and those are the most fascinating shows. And so obviously there is emotion built in to sports stuff, and I think people find it interesting. Also, I think people are looking for different things, but also, what is that like to say, hey, we're having a big project where everybody on this team is now involved, because it is a very uniting system, and it's a uniting statement to make, saying, hey, we're all doing this comic, and there's maybe 8 or 9 of us, or all 11 of us are doing it in some capacity, whether we design a character or somebody's coloring it, or even just somebody says, hey, I'm designing this character, and while I'm not going to be drawing this character, I'm the inspiration behind this. Or, hey, you're co-writing it with somebody who's more of a writer, because obviously that creates unity. It also says, hey, this is our first big project and we all worked on it, and then you sort of all spin off.
That's a great introduction to how we started working, right? So one, if you YouTube Dambe, you're going to see some of the craziest fights. Like, there's no like dancing around for a round like you see in boxing. There's 3 rounds and they brawl. Like, from the moment they start, they're punching. And if you get knocked, there's 3 rounds, and if you get knocked down, it's called a kill, right? So you have your spear. It comes from like training for war, right? Warriors train. So you have your shield hand when you block, you have your spear hand, and if you fall, it's called a kill, and the best of 3 rounds wins, right? So it's a and my African partners were like, we love Dambe, like, yes, like, let's do that idea. So they jumped on because they were familiar with the sport, and they had some buy-in in promoting this idea. And then every artist had to do a Dambe piece. So that's why I have so many Dambe pictures, because each artist is putting out a character, like you said, designing a character. The writers I described some characters, other writers described other characters. So those are not from just one mind, right? Those are multiple minds of people. Like, what would my Dambe fighter be like? What would his power be? What would his inspiration be like? So each person had involvement in that project, and that's kind of like our model now. So any other project we're doing, every artist, right? How do you get the 25%? Right? How do you get paid off of somebody else's series that they're the lead on? Well, I talked to my artists about art being the currency, right? So I can either pay you for this, but then we're not talking about you owning 25% of it, right? But can you help me promote it? Can you make a few pieces to help us get this idea out there? So we started off 4 months ago, Dambe had thousands of people on the Instagram board, right? Some people dabbled in a Dambe comic series. We went full go. So if you go to Dambe, hashtag Dambe on Instagram, you're going to see our stuff all over it from the very top down all the way through the middle, all the way to the very bottom, because we are fully engaged in Dambe, and no one shop, no one person or two-man team can compete with us. We have 11 people. We have 7 artists that are just putting out Dambe character this week, Dambe character. I'm getting like art all week when we were doing our promotion for Dambe, and I'm just posting, right? Posting hashtag, posting hashtag. We partnered with the equivalent of Dana White in Africa. And he, we're actually partners with African Warriors Fighting Championships. They do like training, just like they do like UFC on TV, and they have the young fighters like going through camp. They do that in Africa with Dambe. So we partnered with them and got that influencer spotlight from them who were reposting our stuff, and we own Dambe now from a comic standpoint. Like that's our series. We're the flagship Dambe comic creators now, and we want to make it as big as ninjas, right? So that's our goal, is that eventually, a few years down the road, people will be dressing up like their favorite Dambe character for Halloween, and little kids will be dressing up like Zaki or Alada, whoever their favorite character from our comic is, and that's the end. Our eventual goal is to make it that popular.
And so, what is that like to go international to some degree? Because obviously, having that influencer spot and picking a segue, not a segue, picking a, I guess, sport, for lack of a better word here, and really going and saying, hey, we want to become connected with that, influencer market, and that we want to be involved in this, and that obviously even breaking into Africa. Because the 3 capitals of comics, or the 4, is Japan is number 1, France is number 2, and I think the US is number 3 or 4. And I say this, and I could be completely ignorant on it, but one of the things about Africa as a continent, I don't think of comics when I mention Africa.
It's a growing industry. The culture there, and if my African partners hear me listening, and hopefully I'm representing well, there's a ton of talent. The political and the economic structure for building entrepreneurship or a market, right? A healthy market for art and comics is something that's growing. So it's like where America was, in really the golden age, right? Where comics is new, and people are seeing this as a new profit center, a new way that an artist can make money, and the international space is so connected now. So, like a lot of my artists, that I pay them through Upwork, or I invite them to get on these freelance sites where now they can, because they're getting promoted through our house, they're actually increasing their commissions, and people that are able to reach out to them either through Instagram or Facebook or on some of these freelance sites, and it actually improves their personal economy by being part of Royal House. So it's a great it's a great feeling, kind of seeing some of these young artists get promoted, and I post them, and I always tag the artists. I really kind of have a tough time, seeing creators that will tag their art or their concept and not their artists, or not allow their artists to post a piece that they just did. You know what I mean? Yeah. and show what they've done. Not to knock anybody else, but I really feel like, that's why I call them partners in what we do, because I wouldn't be able to do this without them. I can't create. I can write the character. I can write 1 million characters, but finding the right artist to bring that character to life makes it real, and why I'm able to be willing to share a long-term business venture. But we started with Dambe as the model, right? So I find out who's on the top of the board, right? African Warriors FC, you're on top of the board. I'm going to reach out to you. We want to be in the world of Dambe. I reach out to them. Hey, what's the exchange? Some people will do it for free. Some people know know the value of what they do as a marketer and an influencer. We work out a relationship, right? So, hey, I need you to post us. I need you to, comment. We want to be partners in the world of Dambe. 6 weeks, we own the Dambe board from all of our art is just really overrun the Dambe hashboard. So anybody that's interested in Dambe, that market that's already there, now they filter to our page and they're, looking at our Dambe stuff. We did the same thing with, Cicada, which is an Afrofuturism story, right? Who's on the top of this board? All right, you're on the top of this board. We want to have a relationship with you. We're doing comics in Afrofuturism. Bam, let's work out. You know what I mean? We'll do some art for you. We'll make you a character or something like that. We just want to share this space, and whatever the next one is, we're gonna do new art, a new art comic, right? Who's on that top of that board? We're gonna do a superhero comic, right? Who's on the top of that board? So I've created, and like I said, I didn't come from the world of comics. I came from marketing, business, sales, right? So who owns this market? Where's the model? And how do we connect? How do we network?
Yeah, it's very important to understand who is influential and who isn't in markets. And some markets are obviously easier than others by far. Superhero market is very complicated and it's oversaturated tremendously. And so obviously dealing with all that, and also for me, in my world, I love artists, and I look at, hey, who's the next superstar, and I like to get there first. And I've done very well on that front as well. And so obviously a lot of cool stuff, and then there's just a lot of cool art that's coming out of this, a lot of fascinating characters. And that's the other thing about this comic that is super cool, is that there really is a character for everybody in this book. Whether you want the main character, which I think is Dambe, or you want Ziki, or you want, Alade, obviously I'm just, Ham the Bee, and who floats and stings like the greatest. I wonder who that
Yeah,
Bill.
yeah. You know what? So it's a West African sport, but I want, America is the market, right? America is the market, and that's what I told like, I'm from West Coast. We're gonna be at LA Comic Con. Like, I told my team, we all made it to Hollywood, right? We're gonna be in the building, LA Comic Con 2021, in December. So you guys want to have your work where I'm at. You know what I mean? So this is a relationship that we definitely want to cultivate. So each character is kind of like a mashup between two, like Alade is a mix between Kimbo Slice and Butterbean, right? Like these two like crazy fight, and I just throw that out there to my artist, and he comes up with this new mashup character that's just like completely different than either one of those guys, by themselves, and you add that Dambe element, right? Some of these other characters are mashups between real boxers, and you know what I mean, and another personality, right? There's this character in Dambe that's the equivalent of like the first Hokage, the person that started the world, right? That's kind of just, you get to hear about him, but that's not where the story takes place. But he's so influential, his name always reigns. And I sent that character description as a mix between like Floyd Mayweather and Shaka Zulu, right? That's the mashup. You know what I mean? So the artist just went ham on that character, and he has like 3 pieces where he's like fighting this huge serpent, and that's how he got control of the land from this serpent that wouldn't let anybody drink from the underground water well, so everybody was thirsty and famine because nobody had access to the water. So the very first character had to go and slay that beast, and that's where the power system is explained. So you can call on these different entities, these gods, these deities for power, but there's an equal exchange. So if you do the lightning teleport, that's why that character is blind in one eye. Like you can do this, but your body can't handle the power of a god, right? And I love these flawed characters. I don't like the superhero that never gets tired, right? That can punch through a world, right? I don't really have a mind for creating that type of character. I always feel like it's got to be relatable. So if you want to teleport and use that in a fight, you're going to lose your sight in one eye at least. You know what I mean? If you want to if you want to, warp time or have access to that kind of power, you're probably going to fall and faint or leave yourself vulnerable in exchange for that power. So that's kind of where the history of the magic system comes, and how the world is kind of set into place from his offspring and how the tournament begins. And it was just a crazy joint venture that ended up being just a really good concept.
And there's a lot of stuff coming out of this. And obviously, it's going to be a long tournament, a lot of fighting, a lot of crazy shit going on, for lack of a better word. And I don't want to ruin too much of what's coming out there and what's available. And obviously, there's just a lot of stuff, and sort of own that market in the comic realm.
Yeah, I mean, I love tournament series. I'm a huge Naruto fan. And I feel like, even if you see one fighter fight another, right, how do they fare against the third person? Or, maybe you're right, it's like in sports, right? One team might lose to another team and beat one team, and there's scaling of power. So that's why I love the tournament series, because
And also, tournaments allow for development very easily, in
mhm,
which that a tournament type show, a tournament type comic, Baki is a great example of this, where, you have the position where the guy is, he does well and then he loses, and then he has to go back into retraining to get better and do the next one, and allows for massive character development in a very, very easy way. And I'm not saying you took an easy way out writing, but the tournament model allows for a lot of stuff to have growth and have that, and actually have character development as a writer. And I mean, it's done in anime, and that's not a new concept. Yu Yu Hakusho is a great example of that, where they
mhm.
go through a mission for the first season, and then for the second and first part of the third season, they're through a massive tournament. And then even at the end of the show, it's a massive tournament in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of character development in that, with all those characters from when they start to when they end.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, right? It's a great starting point. And just like the tuning exams, but they grow, where it happens after there, what is life like after the fighting? And that's something that I do think we are able to get into effectively. And so in Dambe, there it's like based off of these guilds. There's like an actual system to it. So the first comic is called Dambe, the Butcher's Guild, because that's the most famous guild. Like, and all the top fighters belong to the Butcher's Guild. And I kind of utilize these different guilds, like the Iron Guild. You're familiar with, what an Iron Guild does, or the a union that does, whatever this aspect of life is, right? The uh, and Zaki is from the Artisans Guild, right? They get no respect, right? Like, who respects the Artisans Guild, right? But he's the one representative of the artisans, or the Writers Guild, but he also fights, right? Because he has a backstory, and he's representing that class of people. So everybody kind of has their champion, like when you go to a major bout and you're supporting your fighter. So there's this whole, like, coming to the tournament, and everybody has their following based on what guild they're representing. And the Butcher's Guild is the starter, right? The first butcher, the first person that started the whole world was a butcher, right? And the butchers, we have this connotation of what a butcher is now, but really they were like the warriors. You're going to go out and hunt the meat. You're going to cut the meat up. You're going to cook the meat to feed the village, right? So the butchers are like the hunter gatherers of the society that allows society to operate. You're going to go slay the serpent, or everybody's going to starve, right? So um, the Butchers Guild is going to evolve into the second book, or arc, which is Royal House. So our name Royal House actually came from this Dambe story, because you have this pool of fighters, and then you have the Royal House Six, which are the top fighters that have already won tournaments, and they're like, they don't fight in the normal tournament anymore. You have to win or become like one of the top fighters to even challenge them, and they're on a whole different class. So you get this kind of like the Hokages, right? You got the Chunin, the Jonin, and you got the Hokages. right? You gotta get to Jonin level before you fight a Jonin. You gotta get to Hokage level, or you better run if you if you find yourself coming in contact with somebody at that level. So there's just working up into the space where these six fighters are like the King's Guard from Game of Thrones, right? They're the people that are kind of like they've gotten out of the lower class, and they're kind of like royalty themselves as fighters. They're the superstars, right? They're the Hall of Famers of the fighting world. And then the last arc is going to be Guild Wars, where it's more of the political. How does this society come from a split society where magic is allowed, and magic kind of has this negative connotation to where Danbei is now, where it's a sportsmanship sport, right? My story is before they banned magic. So once the political becomes unified and they get rid of magic and it just becomes a sportsman type contest, that's when our story ends.
And so obviously there's a lot of stuff going on, and you have a pretty clear idea. And I don't want to push too much further into it because
Oh no, so it's okay, because I think that just gives anybody that's interested more reason to kind of delve into the details. No, I love it.
so obviously there's a lot coming with this, and then obviously there's a lot of development and where it's all going, and obviously even exploring the sport. And I think it's really interesting. And obviously, for people who are interested in this sport, or they see this, or obviously both introducing a U.S. audience to this as well as an African audience into it, which is their sport. I mean, it's super, super interesting, and it's also expanding internationally from a business model. And I think it's very cool. I mean, comics are complicated because, hate to say this, but shipping internationally is a bitch. I run an eBay business or a side hustle. I do not want to ship international. I only deal with the US because it gets expensive. It becomes a headache, especially, I could tell you, so I just got a Kickstarter book from Canada. It cost me $23 to get it from Canada. I send my books out on eBay for $10. Now I send my shipping is a bit high, but my books arrive immaculate. And when somebody's spending $100, they had no problem spending another $10 so that their item arrives perfectly, because they're viewing it as an investment. They're not viewing it anymore as a comic. And so obviously, but shipping, I don't know how much it costs to send a book to Africa. I have no idea.
Shipping to Africa, I'm sure is expensive. I've sent another item there, and shipping costs more than the item itself on that particular send. Which brings us back to digital comics, right? We want to have access to that market, and somebody to be engaged in Danbei, see us digitally, either through Facebook or Instagram, go to our link and read the comic right on their phone, like I read Naruto. I'm waiting on the next Boruto episode to come out, and as soon as next month on the 18th hits, I'm gonna wake up, pull out my phone, and read that episode. Right? So I back to the profit margin on a comic book, right? You charge $5 for it, but if I have to ship the time, if I have to send 100 fulfillments, 200, however many people, right, I don't. That's gonna just completely tax. I don't think I have that much time. Honestly, I don't have that. I definitely going to go into my energy reserves to make whatever is next, especially if we have 5 series coming out. We're not doing a Kickstarter for every single series, every single time we make a comic, right? So, we're going to be very strategic about when, if we run a Kickstarter for this project. But, my artists are paid, and we have a model to make our money on a digital return as we sell digital comics, as we sell merchandise, as we sell as we monetize a YouTube channel with webtoons and things of that nature, affiliate marketing through YouTube, stuff like that.
And so obviously, I mean, I'm from the complete opposite side, because obviously I'm a comic book investor, and people I deal with, they love exclusivity, and they love like a 250 print run or a 150 print run, and they pay good money for it. And so that's one of the things where with Kickstarter that, I kind of like the exclusivity when a book is limited to only 100 because, well, people really like that. And also people view it as an investment. And I'm in the alternative investment space as far as I'm also in the regular investment space. I want to make that clear. And I run an entire separate podcast where I talk about comic book investing because just rate of return is very high. If you know what you're doing in those sectors, much higher than in a lot of ways the stock market can be. And so obviously, what is that like for you? Because if you want to read it and you want to get stories out, I think digital is great. I have a Comixology subscription. I'm reading more comics now for $6 a month on Comixology than I have ever read before because I have more access to it. And I'm reading like 6 graphic novels a month that cost me $6. Now, I don't own that content. But guess what? I'm also reading that content and I don't want to own it and it's a pain in the ass to store it. I don't have any more space in my house for a graphic novel. And if I buy 4 graphic novels a year, that's a big expenditure. Maybe if I buy probably 6 a year, graphic novels, and they're all hardcover, nice brown books. So obviously I'm picking and choosing what I want, but I'm also reading a lot more stuff because, well, it's dirt cheap. So how do you feel about that collector side of things? Because I'm sure people want that type of stuff too.
Well, I talked to, very, very, what they call it, icon in the Black indie comic game, Jibba Anderson, who said that print on demand really has changed the game as far as what you can do to get somebody a physical copy, right? I do believe, and I know we're going to run some Kickstarters to kickstart our market a little bit, and to kind of see and gauge the interest for this IP, and to have some seed money to really market not just the individual issue but the series as a whole. So I think a lot of Kickstarters they make an issue and the money is just to return into their pocket pretty much, right? There's not this long term, right? I'm getting this money to reinvest in this business, right? I'm going to make my money back. I'm going to make another one, see if I can kickstart that, make my money back, and that's really the entire gist of how some people are running Kickstarters, right? It's not I'm going to get this money back and run this high intensity marketing campaign to drive 10,000, 100,000 people to my marketplace, right? But then you're talking about people that really want and influential people in comics that really want that hard copy, that soft cover. So we definitely are going to have that ability, and I think you put a really good kind of nugget for, in my business mind to set away on how we can do that effectively as these books finish, to be able to get
what I think people want more than just a physical copy is they want an exclusive copy. I don't think anymore it's the idea, and I've said this before, and I'm sure if you heard my interviews and you know what I'm going to say, is there's 3 things that are determining business, at least in the entertainment sector. It's on demand, meaning that I want something on my time and not yours. So I'll give a quick tidbit. So I'm a big Law and Order fan. I love Law and Order SVU and I love Law and Order Organized Crime. I don't have cable. I have Peacock. I pay $5, and so guess what? It comes out on Thursday. I watch it. It's up on Peacock by 11 a.m. the next morning on Friday. I'm not gonna go and watch it at Thursday because I don't have cable. But I could watch it on my Friday night, and I'm now sipping a beer watching 2 hours of Law and Order, and I have commercials with it, sure, but I can watch it. I can watch it on Saturday now. I have full access at any given time. I'm a big anime weeboo too. I watch a lot of anime, not when it comes out, but on my time. So I think that's one of the things. The second thing that I think is massive is big libraries that are going to determine it, and then I also think customization and exclusivity in a lot of ways and choice. And so I think those 3 things are determining the future as far as entertainment. I don't back a Kickstarter because I like the project. I'm backing a Kickstarter because I want the exclusive. And also I'm sort of taking a bet sometimes on artists, especially if it's their first outing. And their first outing is a Kickstarter book. And all of a sudden 3 years, 4 years down the road, they become bigger than ever and they get picked up by DC or Marvel. Well, I have their first book, and well, I could sell that now for 4, 6, 10 times sometimes what I paid for it. And it's not saying I'm going to sell it or not sell it, but that's what I want. And I think it's that exclusivity and the on-demand side that's dictating a lot of this stuff.
Well, man, I'm really glad I'm sitting down with you because you're giving me some game, Andrew. Giving me some game, man. I'm definitely gonna have to be taking this right. You don't want to.
I'm
You
curious
find a
what
new
your thoughts are on
in
that.
business, right? You find a profit center. You want to take advantage, even if that wasn't wasn't in your plan. You find that you have the ability to get into a market, or you have this product, or you have this chain of resources that can make this product physical. We have the book. We can make it digital. We can make it hard copy, soft cover, on demand, or like you said, signed copies by the artist. Right? There's a way to make this one book uh, available and attractive to the different types of collectors and people that digest their material. You brought up something else, which it's I don't think it's as lofty, right? I think people achieve the goals that they set out for themselves, right? So we want to have these different projects that are on webtoons that are in this almost anime type feel, right? It might not be anime, but you get these moving panels, you get this voiceover dialogue, you get this musical ambiance on a YouTube. We're partnered with Black Astronauts. One of my partners from Royal House also has like a production company, so they can add music to a webtoon. They can do the voiceover. All right, it's not something that I have expertise in, but they do this, and we want to get onto Netflix, right? We want to get onto Tubi. We want to get onto because I think these big production companies are getting bored with Superman and Batman and Marvel is so. How many different ways can you make Captain America before it just gets old? So they're finding these indie comic ideas. Invincible is one, right? That this is a new twist on the superhero. Yeah, like all the Sandman, right? These and even these more obscure characters, Morbius, right? I don't. Morbius was always a throwaway villain for
Moon Knight.
Spider-Man. I never, yeah.
Do you know how much a Moon Knight 9.8 goes for right now?
I bet higher now that they're talking about making a
Going
movie.
for anywhere from $70,000 to $80,000 for a 9.8 Moon Knight. It's an insane comic. It's an insane comic. It's crazy, and there's so few of them that are like a 6.0, and a 6.0 is like a 30 grand comic. A 9.8 is insane. I think there's like 10 9.8s out there.
But that's that cross right back to okay. I'm writing a novel for Fur versus Priest, and some people might pick up the novel first. People that don't consider themselves comic readers might pick up the novel first and say, "Oh man, these images look cool as well." Like I just follow Pharaoh versus Priest because I love the novel. So yeah, I'll go read the comic. Oh wait, there's a webtoon that I can watch on YouTube about it as well, right? So how many people that love Naruto do anything that has to do with Naruto? Right? I'll read the short novels, I'll read the comic, I'll watch the anime, right? So there's a back to business of indie comics, right? Marvel and DC is still struggling, right? From a business comic selling model, and the movie industry really gave them a jolt of life as these younger audiences that maybe didn't grow up in the golden age of comics, and like I was a kid going to a comic book store every other week to buy 2 or 3 comics, right? So that's their first exposure to it is on TV, but they circulate back and they'll go back and buy the comic or subscribe to the webtoon if there's new stories or figure out the origin story of Dombey and the first butcher, right? So you get this really cross-sectional uh, um, promotion and client base by doing more than just making a comic book.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of IP that really is important. Well, one of the things is that owning your IPs is beyond important at this point, and owning your content and owning, what you own. I own my logo. I own my name. It's very, very useful when you own things because you never know when ownership's going to matter. And also intellectual property is becoming more and more important as we speak every single day. And even the idea, and obviously I don't know if you've ever thought of this, but even selling your intellectual property. I mean, there's plenty of times to sell your intellectual property and take a nice big paycheck. And yeah, I'll give you a great example. I'm going to throw this out there. I'm not saying you're going to do it, so I want to preface this. This is not a news break. But if Netflix said we're going to pay you $30 million for Dambe, I mean that's a hard $30 million to say no to.
That's our exit strategy, man. I've talked to our our team. We've actually discussed what because that's a good business practice, right? To have a starting point and an exit strategy.
And you know what is? I'm not saying they're going to offer you 30 million, but if they came back and said we want to give you 15 million, it's not something that you just say no to so quickly.
I mean, think about back to business, right? And return ROI, right? Dambe, we made on an initial. That was our first round. If somebody came and wanted to buy Dambe for upwards $1 million or up, right? Like how big of a return on investment? Just going back to business, like we can make another idea. Now they want what we have. What do you have next? What do you have next?
Or conversely, I'll give you a better position because what's going on right now with Dynamite. Dynamite, I think, just licensed out Vampirella. And so what's going on with Dynamite is that Dynamite might have been hurting for cash. They might have gotten a great offer to sell the TV/film rights for the next 20 years to a company. I forget which company it is. I made a video on this on my other show. And one of the things is that what if that keeps that company alive for the next 15 years? I mean, what if you selling, and I'm not saying or anything that you develop, you sell for $500,000 and you didn't even make a comic book, but you had a rough draft comic, and all of a sudden your company now doesn't ever need to worry about money for the next 5 years, and you can throw out 15 other ideas, and maybe 6 of them are going to stick and do really well, and the other 9 are profitable, but they're not ultra profitable. Well, you just made a great business decision. It's the idea that selling IP is super, super important. I mean, look at Jim Lee with Wildstorm.
It's huge, and I think a lot of people get into business and they don't know their exit strategy, or you've probably heard about this. People that have this idea and that number is unrealistic, right? So you turn down the $500,000 to $600,000 IP sale, waiting for the $1 million or $2 million that never come, right? Or you hear the horror stories of they just rip off your idea anyway and go and change it up a little bit, and you're completely excluded from the evolution of that seed, right? Or trying to find somebody in court to get a piece of that action, instead of knowing that I'm not a movie creator, or we're not movie creators. Once this gets to that point, hey, you make an offer, and like you said, there's so much more comic content and webtoon content that we can create with that seed money. And seeing back to us driving back to our initial goal, which was to sell more comics and books. So if you see how many more comics is Invincible getting because it has a TV show. People are going back now to read the comic and to see what other stories and other characters have already been talked about, because the next show series hasn't come out yet and they have access to this source material. So it's
I'll give you another one. I'll give you a crazy one. You familiar with My Hero Academia?
Yeah. Oh yes, for sure. I love that show.
Do you know where the idea came for that from?
No.
Did you ever hear of a book called Astro City?
I feel like I've heard that before.
Astro City was a comic in the 90s. Pound for pound, if you put Astro City on top of My Hero Academia and you boil them down to get some of the flashiness from both of them, it's a perfect carbon copy. It is a perfect carbon copy. Most people have no idea about Astro City. And when I'm at a con telling people about Astro City, they're like, really, that exists? And I'm like, yep. And then I go even further. I say the book for Astro City came out of a book called Super Folks. Super Folks is one of Grant Morrison's favorite books ever written that nobody knows about. And that's where the idea for Astro City came out. And that was a book that was done in the 1970s.
Yeah, I mean,
It's wild. It's wild what goes down the tubes and what comes out and tracing things back. The point I'm trying to make is that you can always recreate an idea and things get repackaged and they get rebuilt and you get ripped off. And so it's always good to have an exit strategy. I mean, I'm a comic book investor. I know my numbers with books, and there are plenty of books that I've done very well on, and I know when to make exits. I collect Pop Funkos, and I know when to sell Pop Funkos. There's a reason why I'm taking 2 weeks off, everybody. I'm planning to sell a lot in the next 13 days on eBay, and it's going to be fun, and there's a bunch of stuff coming down the pike on that front. So obviously, understanding where to make an exit and how to make exits is super, super important.
yeah, and that's that's back to business 101, right? When you do when you're creating a business plan, right? How you know I learned this sitting down and starting my training business, sitting down with my aunt who was a business developer at Raytheon, and she was like, I wanted to make this training app, which Nike kind of is done now, where they give you access to these athletes doing training. You can kind of watch them and follow them. I had an idea of doing something very similar to that, and she was like, what you want to do is build this and then sell it to sell it to somebody for $100 million, right? You know what I mean? That's what you want to do, right? You want to build this up and then get out and continue to do what you love doing, right? Because people think they're gonna jump into the movie industry and like, I'm gonna be on the next to the director telling them what to do with this idea, and you know what I mean? Like, no, I'm holding out till you give me $10 million, and they're like, it may not be worth that to us. It's a new concept, right? We don't know the movie industry and how much it costs to make an anime and what the return is. So we don't always have that information. Like $500,000, $600,000. So it cost me a couple thousand to make the book. What kind of return? What kind of good businessman would pass up on that ROI?
So this is going back to the Kickstarter discussion, and I'm going to get flack for this in so many groups, and so many people are going to hate me and hate you for it too. But this is one of the things that if you do a Kickstarter and then you get picked up by a publisher, and then it creates a whole issue because now you're sort of beholden to your audience. While if you self-publish and you're running it yourself and you create your own imprint and your own publisher, you're not beholden to anybody. And it's very powerful. Like I, as an interviewer, I have no sponsors. I am beholden to nobody. It is very powerful because I can ask any question I want to ask. I don't have to worry about a sponsorship. Nobody's calling me anyway. Nobody's offered me a sponsorship. So that's why I have no sponsors. But even still, if I did, they would have to be in many ways. They have to know that I'm not beholden to them. The idea is that I'm in complete control. And when you run your business, and since you're your own publisher, you can do whatever you want with your book. You could choose to sell, you could choose not to. Well, if you're on a Kickstarter, it sort of changes it a little bit because you do have an obligation.
There's I think Kickstarter has taken the place of like you walking into a bank and saying, hey, I want to start a business, will you give me? You actually have this crowdfunding of people that mostly family supporters that like your work, a network of people that are following what you're building, that are saying, hey, I believe in you and I want you to get this idea off the ground. Now, eventually you will saturate that market, right? If you're trying to do that for every single book, issue 1, 2, 3, this series, that series, and that's my issue, is that sometimes that's the only interaction that you're getting in the indie space is this connection of sometimes treating each other like like they're a marketplace only, and you kind of lack this networking and this supporting and artists kind of appreciating artists, writers appreciating writers. It's hey, I have this next Kickstarter.
Oh
Can
my
you
God!
can you
Don't
back
don't
me?
get me started on this.
Right, but I think it is powerful in a way that if you walk into a bank and tell somebody, hey, can you fund my comic book, right? They're gonna laugh you out of chase, right? But so there is it's what you're doing with that. How are you gonna take that seed money, that Kickstarter, that Indiegogo seed money, and make this not just a book, but a growing series that has a long-term future, after this, one or two crowdfunding campaigns.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people fail on that exactly. And I think the community has gotten a lot better, but I also feel that a lot of people don't have business acumen. I mean, I don't really know how to deal with my podcast the right way and what I'm doing here exactly the right way. I'm the first person to admit it, but also I don't really care because it's not a driver for me. This serves a whole bunch of other purposes and actually serves more of a market research for my other business. And so it has a big beneficial, position for me because it actually gives me a lot of insight into a lot of other things. But I digress right there. But I also think a lot of people just, I feel like, there's got to be people who teach people how to run a business with Kickstarter and their comics. And whoever does that and does that well, I am not the guy to do it. So don't ask, please. I will probably not teach you very well, but I feel like that's a big lacking thing on the Kickstarter
Well,
side.
I think that goes back to, Royal House wanting to be a publisher, right? And being able to figure all those things out and say, once you make the book, you get access to our market and get right on making sales, right? You can do a Kickstarter, if you want, but getting onto our marketplace and going to Royal House Comics and seeing a whole line of really interesting content, like you talked about your subscription, right? $6, and you can read Rumble, you can read Dombe, you can read Pharaoh versus Priest, right? Just search through all this different content. Some you might be into, some you might not, but for $6, you have access to these new artists and writers and creators to stimulate your imagination, right? And to allow you, some escape from the rigors of your job, right? Where you can just,
So
chill
to
out
talk
and
about this, because I'm curious, do you think that the motto going forward, because obviously I'm a comicsology guy, and it's when I want to read comics versus collecting comics or investing in comics, those are two separate issues completely. So when I'm a reader, I'm happy to spend my $6 on a subscription every month because it works. It's $6.37 up from Amazon. And do you feel that that's sort of the answer to some degree with having massive big subscriptions? Because I made this statement before where there almost needs to be like an indie image where there needs to be a bunch of companies that band together that basically offer a subscription service, even for like 10, $15, but you have access to like 100 titles. And because that to me seems the only way to compete because we're seeing it with AT&T, we're seeing it with Disney, we're seeing it with Netflix, we're seeing it with Amazon, Hulu, Peacock. It seems to me on the entertainment front that everybody is becoming a big conglomerate, and I don't see why indie shouldn't do it either.
yeah. Well, I think sometimes indie companies don't give themselves the patience that it took Marvel and DC to establish what they've established as far as building up a market to do what you want with it, right? It's because it's so much out of pocket expense. It's the Kickstarter has to give me this money back so that I can continue to make the next book or fill this hole in my pocket, right? If we had a long-term vision and thought about the power of 99 cents, right? 10,000 people paying 99 cents a month, 20,000 people paying 99 cents a month, 100,000 people paying 99 cents a month, right? The power of numbers and sales and access in a digital world and the right price point, right? So Dombe actually has a mobile based app game that's in development, right? It's a kind of a Street Fighter with 10 of those characters that you see that you get to choose, and it's very rudimentary, But you know, if you're wasting time, people were playing the little duck game. And how hot was that for for a summer where all you pressed was up and down and try to get through this level, right? So to be able to like have a mobile game where you're invested in these characters and you can download that for free, and there's a mobile access to it, or 99 cent whatever. The power of numbers and building a market is what I think sometimes indie businesses don't truly value. It's an immediacy of return that most businesses kind of, they don't expect that, right? If you go to a business owner and talk to them about how long it took them to really generate a following, to get out of the hole, get into the black from the red, and to back to ROI, and just making sense with numbers, right? If I make this book for $6,000 and somebody's going to pay me $500,000 to make a movie out of it, and you're going to say no because you're waiting for the next company to come offer you 3 million or something, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's, where
Yeah.
is the business savvy in indie comics? And that's what I think people will appreciate from Royal House as we get established. People are going to submit to us. We're going to have, tens or hundreds of people that will submit their finished comic to us to get on our marketplace.
It's also this idea that, I don't know if you saw the Boom video from their creator, and I'm going to put a target on both of us slightly, but he made a video in 2019 where he said we can't take submissions, and basically he went and he had all these nice submissions, and he said, I'm throwing them in the recycling bin, and he looked like an asshole, honestly. And I put up and I said, this is why indie is thriving. And what that made me want to do when I saw that video is it made me want to build my own publishing company and accept every submission that Boom projects, and then purposely shove it into Boom's face. I mean, it's a real problem, and it's not that he was like, I legally can't accept it, but there's 15 ways around that. They just don't want to accept it because they want to look like the bad boys. And my problem with it is that it's a very famous video, but it actually isn't that even famous. It's got like 4,000 views because it's a ridiculous video, and he looks like a dick when he did it, the CEO of Boom. And it's like, why would you go and say, I'm recycling these beautiful submissions to me? It's like, it's the attitude of a big name companies. I think it's also a problem right now. But even like, because honestly, if I'm to do a comic book and I don't want to, crowdfund it, I would absolutely want to submit to a publishing house. And it's not even a percentage position. It's the idea that I just don't want to do fulfillment because I got 15,000 things going on in my life. And I don't want to have to worry about, hey, did this thing go out? How do I print on demand? How do I market it? It's that, especially if I have a somewhat good idea, how do I also, it's just not something, I don't want to deal with the business side of it. I almost want to collect a royalty check on my work.
And I think we'll get a lot of submissions after we've built the house of people that would love the access, right? And we have a brand, and we want to accept people that fit into this model. We want to be international, right? We want to take ideas from Brazil, Cuba, America, Africa, Europe. We want to be open, right? We want to tell under represented stories, right? So African American, these different communities that maybe don't always have access to the big scope of a Marvel or a DC, to say that Royal House has a place for you, right? And I think people appreciate the genuineness of knowing where you started. And sometimes I think people don't, when they get up there and they have the house, it's like, we're not taking submissions now because that makes us look like, higher. But, I had somebody that was telling me, like, if you don't do this a certain way, like, you'll never end up, Marvel will never see you, or you'll never end up in a diamond catalog. And I'm like, good thing that was never part of my business plan, right? You know what I mean? Great. That actually doesn't throw me off at all, because I plan on making my own website, generating my own audience. And I learned this in sales, right? From my first job at that facility with the owner that never played sports. And I'm the one going out to the community, getting the clients that are coming in, and I'm getting my little commission check. But I'm the one that's on the front lines. I'm building this market, me, but I'm not getting the benefit of it. So I'm not doing that anymore as a business owner. I'm not making this book to go get published by somebody else who can tell me whether my work is good enough or not, or is going to give me a rate and pay and price, price for me. I'm going to set my own price. I'm going to filter my market to people that love us and me and what we do. And then we're gonna figure out our exit strategy.
I feel that. I feel that. So obviously we've been speaking for a while. So and I'm pretty sure I'm going to miss a bunch of stuff. But I figured I'd give you a chance to promote yourself, and you can tell us about everything that I missed briefly, so that I don't miss it
Our
all.
website is you can go to our website www.royalhousecomics.com. It will be live with a lot of our content, and it's live right now. Where you can get your email, where we can let you know when things are releasing, and literally in about a week or two, that website will be just running, buzzing with content and photos and access to our t-shirts and some of the merchandise as these comics are rolling out late summer, early fall. So www.royalhousecomics.com. The website is open, but the content will be streaming out fairly soon. Our first release, Pharaoh versus Priest, will be out this fall, and just a line of comics coming after that this year. Dombe, Detective Rumble, Cicada 7, Sync Project, just rich content. I really appreciate you for allowing me to come on and talk about what we do and who we are. So you'll be hearing that name, Royal House Comics. Will be at Comic-Con this year. I really appreciate you, brother, for allowing me to come on and talk with you.
And so I've been saying this collectively that, and I'm going to keep saying it. I said it 92 times so far this year, and I'm going to be saying it probably another 90 times at least this year, if not more, the way I'm going. You have to support indie. And what that means is that you have to back indie content creators, whether that's Raudric or whether that's me. I'm an indie content creator, just the same as everybody else is in the Kickstarter and indie comic world. And what you have to do is you actually have to buy projects. You have to buy books. You have to, pick up books. And it is important. And it goes a long way. Whether that book is $1 or it's $20, you have to go pick it up. Because when you buy the book, it actually means something. It actually shows that you care. And then that money, pays artists, it pays creators. And then also, some of that money winds up going back into producing the next issue and producing, the next book. And also sometimes, and this sometimes happens, is that sometimes a creator has to go through 3 or 4 books to get a hit. That happens too. And so while I'm backing a project, maybe the first project that I buy from any publisher isn't necessarily that they're going to be the greatest work they've ever done, but they need that to get to the next and the next issue and the next issue. And then all of a sudden, you're really helping to build out an entire company, and then you're going to get the content you want. Now, I understand, even going further off of this, that COVID has wrecked people. And I want to make this explicitly clear. I run an entire podcast called the Comic Book Investing System Podcast. And so this is coming out of a place of love that COVID has wrecked people financially. And so if you are in a situation where you're struggling with money, please don't go back anybody if you're in debt and every dollar matters to you, because you shouldn't go hungry or not be able to pay your mortgage to buy comics, no matter what. It's one of those things, and you should probably get yourself financially stable. So I don't want anybody to back me, or I think you would agree nobody should back you if they're in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, me and you met as I was advertising that virtual Comic-Con, right? Because a lot of those Comic-Cons didn't happen last year. So I figured, man, I built up this Facebook group, and how can I help other indie creators take advantage of this space that I've built with the network? And that ran last weekend, and it was super cool, Andrew. A lot of people, the creators of Yule that you had on, Jibba, just so many creators took advantage of that space, and they backed each other. I was like, I'm only giving you this space, and I'm only promoting you on the top of the group if you promise to back another creator. So people were backing it, like, hey man, I got you. Hey, I backed yours. This was cool. So it was really cool event. I would love to talk to you next time we do that, to actually get some live, interaction with some of these creators, because I remember we were talking about, how to really flesh this out. So, man, I agree, man. Back those books, support these indie creators, like, share, comment, right? It
Yeah, it's
exposes their
super important to like, share, and comment, and that's where I was going with this, saying, hey, look, if you're in a financial rough time, sharing goes a long way, and because if you share it on your wall or share it into a Facebook group, and obviously you're in a bunch of groups and I'm in a bunch of groups that overlap each other, but I'm sure I'm in a few groups that you're not in, and you might be in a bunch of groups that I'm not in, and all of a sudden, if something gets shared around, people see it and they're like, oh, this is what's going on with this book. And, this has happened on my show where people are like, oh man, you're interviewing this person. This project looks awesome. I just backed it. And it goes a long way. And you might say, oh, well, only 4 people backed it. But what if those 4 people put you over and got your project funded? Or if those 4 people, said, oh man, I just picked up this book. I didn't even know this existed. So it goes a long way. And you don't know who's watching. A lot of people, I have a lot of industry friends on my Facebook page, and you could go through my friend list, everybody, if you would like to. And you never know that they might be looking, and some of them work for DC, some of them work for Marvel, some of them work for Zenescope, and then some of them work for all 3 of those companies. And you never know if somebody might be like, hey, I'm an artist and I'm got a project, and boom, it can make a huge difference. And a lot of people have industry friends, and you don't know who's watching, when they're watching, how they're watching, and what's going on. So that's super important to understand. So on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Indie comics is where it's at, man. I've seen a lot of creators in these groups, independent comic creators group, Black comic creators group. I've created my own Royal House Comics group that just allows indie creators to come in, and I think we're pushing the game forward, right? There's a little burnout on the superhero genre, and these indie creators are finding new ways to tell these stories that connect hard and deep and personal, and you and Royal House are finding a way to really magnify that in a way that's going to help get it out to the masses. So I appreciate you, brother. I love your show, man. I'm going to keep following and seeing you rise, man.
Yeah, well, I hope it's a journey, and it's a much needed vacation. I am officially going to be on vacation in about 30 seconds because this is a wrap. 92 interviews, 6 months. Don't do it, everybody. Don't do that number, because believe me, you will get exhausted. I am on a relatively 2-week vacation as of right now. I've always wanted to do this, and so that is a wrap.
Yes, sir.